Hello, this is my second game from the second match of the Dominion League here. The board is a massive engine there. There's Margaret for draw, you have plus actions from Mining Village and Festival. Also Ironmonger can turn up actions for you, but it's not reliable. Other cards you want to play often, well, Margrave obviously, Swamp Hag, you want to get one in play every turn ideally, and Hagler. Hagler is a big player here. You can buy Margrave haggling mining villages, build your engine very quickly. So that is the aim of the game for me here. Also my opponent, they open Ironmonger. Ironmonger is decent at getting to 5. Ironmonger Silver is what I was considering here, and that is quite good to get to 5 actually. So here, really the choice is between Ironmonger and Silver. I suppose you could go for Feast if you like, but I opt for the Ironmonger here. On 3, I was honestly considering Silver, but my opponent picks up an Expedition and it makes me think, well, I wanted the Silver to get to 5 to buy Hagler. Now, can the extra 2 cards from this Expedition get me to 5? Because if I can do without the Silver, I would happily do without the Silver. So after giving it some thought, I think that the Expedition is worth it. I can get to my 5 this way. The reason, especially in this deck with no trashing, you want to optimize your stop cards. So if you can get a Hagler instead of a Silver, you would happily choose to do so. My opponent gets their Hagler here, and I get my Hagler. The draw is going to be tight with no trashing, so the stop cards that you want to play, you really want to make sure that they're good and they are the ones that you want to play. So here my opponent, I pick up my Hagler there, my opponent has 5 and gets a Margrave. I get my Hagler down and have 5, so this is quite good for me. Pick up a Margrave and a Mining Village. I'm trying to get my draw going as soon as possible here. My opponent plays an Ironmonger and with Hagler comes up with 5 coin. I thought they would have gone for a Margrave here with a Mining Village, but instead make a more interesting decision, picking up a Swamp Hag and an Ironmonger. Swamp Hag is a card that I have difficulty dealing with, so we'll see how I manage to deal with it this game. Get rid of this estate and it turns up a Margrave, so I'm quite happy to see that. I get to attack my opponent here. On 6, it can be double Expedition. I was considering getting a Swamp Hag here because I don't want to be the only one making difficult decisions, but instead I opt for a Margrave. I want to get some draw in my deck. I want to be able to draw as soon as possible. This was my thought process there. So my opponent plays a Margrave here, but it doesn't actually hurt me because it doesn't change how much money I would have. Still 4 coin. My opponent picks up a Mining Village here. It's a bit sad that this Hagler doesn't come with $3, but it only comes with 2. But I'm still going to buy a Mining Village, even though I'd have to gain a Silver. The 1 Silver, you can deal with it. 2 maybe a lot. 1, yeah, it's okay, I suppose. The other option was Expedition there, but I didn't want to get it. So here, my opponent gets the first play of their Swamp Hag in. That Ironmonger turns up a Margrave, which I'm quite happy to see. A bit fortunate, I think. And I get to play both my Margraves this turn. Hoping for a Hagler here. Instead find the Silver. So you see a little bit what we're talking about. If that Silver was a Hagler, I'd have had much less hesitation going through this Swamp Hag attack here. However, it's not a Hagler. I only have 8. Now without the Swamp Hag, 2 4s I think. Mining Village and Ironmonger probably. With the Swamp Hag, I have to think a bit. Comments from my last game with Swamp Hag were that I played too conservatively against it. I was too afraid. So bearing that in mind, I'm going to try to play a bit less scared and buy cards, hopefully sensible buys, through the Swamp Hag attack. So instead of getting 2 4s here, I opt for a Margrave. I notice that I have a bit of actions, so I can potentially support this third Margrave, and I get an Expedition here. I know my opponent has Margrave, and I can knock down the Expedition hand, However, the expedition is still useful even though there's Margrave around, because with no trashing, the expedition can help line up your engine parts. I was hoping to see Mining Village and Margrave here. Instead, I see two Margraves and a Haggler, so that isn't great. I have a choice here of which terminal to keep. I choose the Margrave. One, because I want to attack my opponent as often as possible. And two, I don't want to get another silver off a Mining Village with the Haggler. So here my opponent picks up a Margrave and a Mining Village through the Haggler and an Expedition from the extra money. So I am glad that I kept the Margrave instead of the Haggler. I'm able to knock down the Expedition hand. On 3 though, I wish it was 4. I would pick up a Mining Village there probably. I'm going to get an Expedition. It's not as bad as it looks with Margrave on the board, like I said. So here my opponent plays Ironmonger and then plays the Swamp Hag. So now second turn with Swamp Hag down. So we'll see what I do here. This Ironmonger turns up that one curse that I bought and it immediately makes me regret it. It hurts to have an Ironmonger that gives you absolutely no benefit. So here I get one Margrave in, which is good. Knocks down my opponent's Expedition. And with 9 now, you already know what to do if there's no Swamp Hag. You go Margrave, haggling Mining Village maybe, and then you go Ironmonger, haggling Silver probably. With the Swamp Hag, things are different, and I opt to get a Swamp Hag at this point, haggling a Mining Village and buying an Expedition. The Swamp Hag is because I am tired of being the only one having to make difficult decisions this game. So I want to see what my opponent does with Swamp Hag down here. Fully expecting Margrave, do not see Margrave though. Instead, my opponent buys an inn, haggling an Ironmonger. The inn gets a stack of action cards at the top of my opponent's deck. So I'm happy to play Margrave here and disrupt that hand. Pick up another Margrave here. I want the draw. I want the draw. If I'm going to go through Swamp Hag's attack sometimes, I want a lot of draw to be able to deal with these curses. This is what I was thinking through the game here. On 6, my opponent gets a Margrave, haggling a Mining Village. So my opponent is clearly ahead at this point. I put my Swamp Hag down, so we'll see what my opponent does, and they go for double Expedition instead of buying a card. So I see an alternative way to deal with Swamp Hag there, but again the game state is different for my opponent than it is for me. So here, happy to play this Margrave to knock down that double Expedition hand. Don't want to give your opponent a 9 card starting hand. That's almost tactician level stuff there. So here, the reason for the inn here is because I've just gone through 3 Mining Villages and I know that I have a bunch of Margraves in the back with no actions. So I put the inn in the deck so that my Margraves can potentially find plus actions, which ends up happening here. So my opponent has quite a good turn here. Maybe this is due to the double Expedition. They were able to pick and choose what to keep, and they also would know what's left in their deck. Maybe, not sure. But 11 with Haggler in play is excellent. Going for what, Margrave into Mining Village and then an inn into an Ironmonger. And all the inn allows the Margrave and the Mining Village to be at the top of the deck because I believe my opponent drew all the way through their deck there. Here, this isn't a great turn, and with Swamp Hag down, I just buy an Expedition. Here, I get hit with the Margrave, but I'm still able to hold on to Village, Margrave, and Haggler. So, like I said, my opponent is clearly ahead of the game at this point. At the beginning of the game, our deck structure was roughly identical. Things changed, I believe, when that Swamp Hag was bought. And I feel like that card set me back again in this game. Again, another $11 hand with Haggler here. Goes for a second Swamp Hag with an Ironmonger and another inn with an Ironmonger here. So my opponent really wants to tighten the screws here, getting a Swamp Hag down every turn. So as I was saying, we had identical deck structure roughly up until that Swamp Hag was bought. So I think the Swamp Hag lost me this game here. It slowed down my ability to build. This is a decent turn for me. There's no Swamp Haggle, so I get the Haggler here. Still going for Margrave and Villages at this point. I'm not satisfied with the kind of draw my deck has, so I want more. My opponent has stacked the top of their deck, so they're going to have a good turn this turn, obviously. Swamp Hag comes down with 5 only. It's not that good of a turn actually, but with 5, my opponent has a choice now with my Swamp Hag in play and opts to go through it, picking up a Margrave and haggling an Ironmonger here. So here the inn saves the day. I can play the inn, get this Margrave through. However, I don't find any more actions, and I'm just going to play this Margrave, hoping to find some money to make this turn less miserable. On 5 here, I don't want anything on 5, so I just buy an Expedition, especially with the Swamp Hag in play. So yeah, I guess I didn't recognize how good Swamp Hag could be. Maybe I should have bought that after the Haggler instead of the Margrave. Not entirely sure. Here my opponent is kicking off and having quite a good turn. Get rid of this Ironmonger in favor of the Mining Village because I know it's guaranteed +2 actions. Bunch of Ironmongers, Swamp Hag comes back in play here, and my opponent is able to draw through till the end of their deck. This is the biggest turn they have. 12 coin with Haggler in play. No reason really not to go for Province at this point. My opponent already has the points advantage because I've taken more curses through the Swamp Hag. The Province further cements that and haggles an Ironmonger of that Province, buying another one. So piles are very thin. Only 2 or 3 mining villages left. So here I trash these mining villages so that I'm able to buy a Province. I'm trying to stay close in points so that maybe I can pull some kind of pile out trick. My opponent may have a bad hand. I might be able to kick off again next turn and somehow pile out. Maybe. I know my opponent is way too good and way too attentive to allow that to happen, but I have to try, right? I have to try to win, and that's my only way to win at this point, if I do something sneaky with a pile out. So get rid of the mining villages to get a Province. We are now 2 points apart, but our decks are of much different quality here. Here I get rid of one of the Margraves, keeping the Swamp Hag here. Not sure if that was correct, to be honest. I probably should have gotten rid of the Swamp Hag. But seeing this turn so far, I think my opponent is able to close out the game and does so with the last 2 mining villages. So thank you for watching. See you in the next one.